Hello, everyone. Welcome to Central Park. My name is Ian. I work for the Central Park Conservancy, and we are the nonprofit that manages Central Park and takes care of it. And we recognize that, unfortunately, it isn't possible for many people to make it to Central Park right now. So we here at the Conservancy want to bring the park to you through this series of weekly walks. So every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m., we take a lunchtime stroll through the park. And today we'll be crossing the park from east to west, from the Metropolitan Museum of Art to the west side, where the American Museum of Natural History is located. Happy New Year to you all. I'm really excited to be doing our first walk of 2021, and I hope you enjoy. Once I get through the housekeeping, the walk will be about 15 minutes, and you'll see photographs taken by myself this past week. And I've also sourced some historical images from the Museum of the City of New York and the New York Public Library, as well as the New York Historical Society. And so we'll see those on our walk. Our mission at the Conservancy is stated here, you can see on your screen, is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. And so I hope that this is a relaxing break in your day for you, and you find some enjoyment in this, whether this is a place that you've visited many times or you've never seen in person before. I hope that this makes you feel like you're here with us. And the housekeeping that I have to just tell you about before we begin, if you're not familiar with Zoom, there are some features that you can use to engage with everybody, over 300 people on today's walk with us. There is a chat feature that you can use to say hello, say where you're from, or add any comments that you'd like. I've seen that some people have had issues with the chat feature. They don't want it popping up on your screen. If that's the case, there might be something in your settings that after this walk, you might want to go onto your Zoom account and play around with the settings, because the chat doesn't always have to pop up on your screen. But you will want to look out in the chat for some messages from my colleagues Juan and Ryan about upcoming programs we have. Tomorrow we have a winter tree walk. That's January 7th, Thursday at 3 p.m. if you're interested in learning more about trees. We also have a virtual tour, which is a longer program. Those are 45 minutes next Tuesday on January 12th, called the Southern Welcome Tour. We'll have another weekly walk with Ryan next week, same time as this one, up the Ramble. And a special program that is being held next week that you'll want to look out for is called Behind the Park, Restoring Central Park's Historic Dairy. It's all about the current restoration project of the Dairy Visitor Center. And speaking will be Marie Warsh, the Central Park Conservancy historian, and Denise Kavany, I hope I'm saying that correctly, who's an architect for the Central Park Conservancy. They'll be telling you about that. It is a $15 program, but my colleagues will be dropping a discount code in the chat. You'll see it there, but I'll say it's Dairy21 for $5 off that program. And if you are a member who supports Central Park, you'll have an additional $5 off with your discount code as well. So check that out. That was a mouthful, but that will be all written down in case you missed any of that. And there's also a Q&A feature that you can use to ask questions of my colleagues, who will do their best to answer those. And you will also see some polls pop up on your screen. And I'm going to launch a poll right now. And what I am asking you is just about New Year's resolutions. Not that I think you need a New Year's resolution, but I was reflecting on this silver lining that we're able to engage with you all on the online here, and we talk about so many different topics that relate to Central Park, and I've been overwhelmed really with gratitude and joy that you are all so interested in so many things that relate to Central Park. And so if you would like to, I just wanted to ask you to reflect on maybe things that you would like to learn more about this year. I asked you a couple weeks ago about things you'd like to see more of in our programs, and we've taken that into account. But maybe this is helpful for you. I hope that we provide interesting jumping off points and some new information for you. There are a wealth of resources online or in your local library that you can use to learn more about topics. And I hope that, once again, our walks encourage you to explore something that you're interested in. So please check that out. And then on our last note, I just wanted to say that my colleagues will drop a link to a special map we have of Central Park called the Access Map. For those of you who would like to recreate the walk that we're taking today in person and do it yourself, but you like to avoid stairs, we actually have a map that can help you follow the route that's best for you. And today, this will actually be a walk with no stairs. There will be a few inclines that I'll point out, though. That was a lot of housekeeping, I know, but I promise the walk itself will be 15 minutes, so don't worry. And in here we begin. We have Central Park on the left here. I'm outlining the area that will be today in this blue rectangle you see pop up on your screen. We're exploring the park, the middle of the park today. And as I mentioned, we're walking from the Metropolitan Museum of Art over there on the east side, beginning at East 82nd Street, to the American Museum of Natural History on the Upper West Side. And here we are, here's our route for today. And I've called it Crossing the Park Museum to Museum. To me, there's a lot of connections between Central Park and the museums that surround it. There are many great museums that surround it, but these two stick out for a couple of reasons for me. One, they're two of the oldest museums physically in this area, and the architect, the lead architect of Central Park, whose name was Calvert Vaux, became very famous and renowned after creating Central Park, of course. And he contributed to a number of buildings around Central Park, and along with an architect named Jacob Ray Mould, who also had a big hand in Central Park, actually designed the original building of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the American Museum of Natural History as well. So there's that immediate connection between the park and these museums. But I also think in a bit more abstract way, there's a connection in that there was a great deal of vision, I think, when the park was created and these public museums were created to create a place where everyone could go and learn about things that interest them or just enjoy a day off from work. And so to me, it's just a very special place, and it all ties together. It's a wonderful place to visit. And there were also efforts throughout history, particularly in the early part of the 20th century, to physically connect the two museums. You'll actually get a really nice bird's eye view of where we'll be walking today from this image. You'll see in the middle of the image, the old reservoir, the lower reservoir, that was decommissioned in the beginning of the 20th century and eventually demolished. And so there was a big question about what would go in this space. And of course, it became a big battle, really, as everyone had a different vision. And one of the ideas was to create a promenade that would link these two physically. And while that never came into fruition, we will explore how these are connected in other ways. But this was one possibility. Of course, they are connected, just not by one straight path. And it will be a nice walk today. Last historical image for a bit of context. This is actually the first version of the Metropolitan Museum that was located in Central Park. The Met began about a decade before this. This is in 1880 when this building was created, but the Met began about a decade earlier, was located in a few places, and eventually made its way to Central Park. This building, once again, opened in 1880, and this was the one that was designed by Calvert Vaux and Jacob Ray Mould in a style that they felt connected to the park well and fit in with the landscape in a Gothic revival style. And you can see a bit of this bright red brick facade inside the Metropolitan Museum of Art today. It's been swallowed up by later additions. And before we move into current day pictures, I should share the results of the poll that you'll see on your screen. And it seems like we have a range of interests. And if you have ones that I did not represent, please share in the chat if you'd like. But the one that won out was the history of public spaces, and it's quite a long and colorful history that really fascinates me. So I'm glad you share that interest as well. But we'll see the modern version of the Met here that has swallowed up Calvert Vaux's Met, which is, this is probably the most famous image of it, the facade of the Met on Fifth Avenue, which was designed by Richard Morris Hunt in a Beaux Arts style. So it's much larger and grander, but it is an iconic New York image. And of course, we get the hot dog stands right in front of it, which I think just makes this a wonderful image. And make sure you have your rain boots and umbrella because it is a rainy day. Perhaps it is a more conventional museum day, but I find it's lovely to walk around the park in all weather if you have the right gear. And to connect the museum to the park further, in another kind of abstract tangent, it is such a huge museum with one of the most extensive collections of art on the planet. And accordingly, it's always changing. There are always new exhibits going up. And I'm connecting this spiritually to the park because in the same way that the museum is perennially interesting, I think the park is as well, in the way that it changes with the seasons and with the people that you see visiting it. So it, to me, is tied to the park, both in its history and in its essence. And as we walk up around the Met, you'll see this formal landscape lined with trees. And as we pass this formal landscape, we'll start to transition to the more naturalistic, more chaotic landscape of Central Park. And you can see that one of the transverse roads here that cuts through the park, and we'll be walking through the park on pedestrian paths instead. And you'll get a sense of how the museum has expanded over generations and how different styles of architecture have blended together to create a really unique building. And it begins to be swallowed by the park as we go further, and the landscape becomes more pastoral. I usually actually walk below the Met for whatever reason. There's an arch down here that I really like, and that's just how I enter the park often. But as I often opine, you're rewarded by taking new paths and exploring new areas. And I just never walk just on this path for some reason. And I was able to see a couple new sites. So as we're walking, we'll get to see this really large tree here with these swooping branches that I really liked. And we'll see a couple other people braving the elements, like this person walking their dog here. But walking through the mist and the windy day here, we get a really peaceful sense of just us and nature, I think. And we'll also see this other wonderful perspective of the obelisk that's in the park, which is a 3,500-year-old obelisk juxtaposed, or maybe a better way of putting it would say it's, there's a parallel between this obelisk and the super modern skyscrapers in the distance. And it's this movement that allows you to see new perspectives of the city that's just always inspiring to me. And walking past the slick drive here, we'll also see a statue of Alexander Hamilton, which was erected in 1880, the same year that the Metropolitan Museum of Art was established. This statue was placed here, and I think it's appropriate because the Metropolitan Museum of Art has probably one of, if not the most extensive collection of American artwork and paintings. So that, to me, that ties it together. So it's a great place for that statue. And if you're looking on the map here where we're represented by this figure, you'll see a little dark green sphere. If you see those on our maps, that denotes where a statue is. So that might be helpful for you in the future. And now we'll walk to the Great Lawn. This is the site of that old reservoir we were looking at before. And like I said, there was a big question mark about what would fill this space once the reservoir was demolished. And this was one vision for a potential space, or a potential replacement for that reservoir. And this was this huge, vast, sunken garden drawn up by Thomas Hastings, whose firm is most well known for its New York Public Library on 42nd Street. Thomas Hastings created this landscape that you can see. It was very formal by the symmetrical plantings and line trees. What you're seeing along the sides are an amphitheater, and then on either sides there's a sunken garden, and actually on the right it's a kind of like a lagoon with a fountain in the middle of it. And of course this was never to be. There was there was different financial circumstances, the start of World War I, or the America entering the First World War, and then just varying interest in this project, and also competing images of what this landscape should look like. Some people didn't want a very formal landscape. They wanted to stick with the kind of naturalistic pastoral landscape favored by the so-called homestead purists. But what won out is the Great Lawn today, which was kind of favored by labor-aligned politicians who created something more recreational and that would be more, in their eyes, and I actually agree, it's more functional. So it's something less grand and palatial than that huge amphitheater. But to me, it is an iconic space in Central Park. And I just love that it's a place where you can go and you can see people playing sports or just lounging or just going for a walk. And these kind of park landscapes, it's not a forest and it's not formal, it's just park to me, which is kind of unique, are some of the most lively places. So I really like this one. And of course, you can talk about the what ifs and you can have your own opinion on what you think this should have looked like, but this is what it is today, and it's iconic. Of course, you can't actually go on the Great Lawn right now. We actually close these lawns for rest in the winter, which is really just what we have to do to take care of these lawns. If you come in the summer, you'll be amazed really by how nice the grass is and just how lovely of a place it is to come. But the only way to achieve that really is through careful management. And so during the winter, they will be closed. Still a great place to walk though. We can go around the path here. There are a lot of lovely trees in this area that you can check out. And you can also see Belvedere Castle, which is another Calvert Vaux and Jacob Raymold creation. So I mention him almost on every walk, it seems like, but I think he's one of the lesser recognized figures who had a huge hand in shaping the architecture of New York City, as well as the park system. And so past Belvedere Castle, you can see where we are here. We're gonna walk west and get to the other museum where we'll end our walk. But in order to do so, we'll have to pass Delacorte Theater, which is the home of Shakespeare in the Park you may have heard of. This was established in 1962, and there's free Shakespeare plays in the park in the summer. It's a great tradition we have here in New York, and you can see some statues that represent the programming. You have a bronze statue of the Tempest and Romeo and Juliet on the right. So we'll walk past there and we'll see a few more nice images of Central Park. You have to cross this drive here. And I should mention there was a bit of a slope that we just walked through. So if you have trouble with like steep inclines, just keep that in mind. And also just be very careful when you're crossing the roads here. And past that, we'll see the yard, which is where we at the Conservancy base our operations for taking care of the park. So if you're curious about all the tractors and stuff, that's what that is. But we've gone through our little rainy walk through the park, and we can see from the Beresford here, this residential building, that we've reached the Upper West Side. So we've walked about a half mile across, more because we took a windy path. But now we can see from the park here in the distance, the American Museum of Natural History, which also has a shared history with the park. Prior to the creation of the park, actually there was a publicly owned piece of land here called Manhattan Square, which was set aside when the grid system of Manhattan was created in 1811. And there wasn't really much developed up here at that point. But this was publicly owned, and you can see on this map of the water courses of New York, you can see that there was one time even a stream that connected Central Park to the location of the museum. So in that sense, it's physically connected. But But eventually, by the early 1870s, there was support for creating a science museum up here. And who else but Calvert Vaux and Jacob Ray Mould, as I've said 20 times already, were chosen to create a design here. And originally, another last connection I'll mention about the museum is that the original collection was actually housed in the Arsenal, which is a building that's still in Central Park by 64th Street. But here is the museum by the early 20th century. This is actually already expanded from Calvert Vaux's original design, but you can see it's a massive building that would have really stood out at this point when there was less development in the Upper West Side, but you can still see it today. This is, we've left the park a little bit, to be fair, but I felt like I had to include this so you could see just how beautiful of a building this is. And this is on West 77th Street. So really in a short period of time, you can go from one great art museum to through a beautiful park into a great museum of natural history here. And I don't want to snub all the other great museums. Right across the street, there's the New York Historical Society, and there's really probably dozens of museums in this area that are great. But I just wanted to share these two because once again, I really feel like they're very connected to the park and they're beautiful places to visit. Wow, sorry, I was very long-winded there and I probably went over time a bit, but before leaving you, I wanted to put up an image of the walk that we went on to recap and to invite you, if you're able to, you can recreate this path for yourself in person. And of course, you could go in the opposite direction if you'd like, but I got off the subway on the east side and I walked from 82nd Street here around the museum, around the Great Lawn, past Delacorte Theater into the Upper West Side. So I'll leave this up just for one more second so you can absorb it and maybe get an idea of where you'd like to explore. But while it's up, I just wanted to thank you all again. And I neglected, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, to share my second poll. And if you're interested, I just wanted to allow you to reflect on, or invite you to reflect on if you visited any of these places and if you have a favorite. And if you haven't ever visited New York, or maybe you just haven't visited these places, that's okay too. Maybe this reminded you of a place where you live that you love, and you'll be able to take a lovely walk there as well. And regardless of where you are in the world, I hope that this kind of reinforces some of your interests and yeah, just gets you thinking about nature or art or whatever you're most interested in. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure getting to share my love of Central Park with you all. Once again, we'll be back next week. Ryan will be doing a walk of the Ramble, and my colleagues will be dropping links to our other upcoming programs. Again, in case you missed my spiel in the beginning, you'll see all of those linked there. And you can also visit our website if you'd like to find those programs and more information. You can see the URL on your screen here. I will end the poll and share the results. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was the winner. Both the museums are fantastic. But yeah, it's one of the best art museums in the world, absolutely. But I think, and I feel very fortunate to live here and have access to these great institutions and one of the best public parks in the world. So yeah, I think I've covered just about everything, but once again, please check out our other programming in the chat. And I hope to see you again next week for our weekly walk. Please check out our past programming on our YouTube channel as well, Central Park NYC. But until next time, from the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe and be well. Thank you.